All right, let's dive right in. Have you ever really thought about how we talk about cities? It turns out there's this whole secret language that planners and geographers use to classify them based on their size, their purpose, even their power. So in this explainer, we're going to decode that language for you. So let's start with a little puzzle. What's the actual technical difference between a massive economic engine like Mumbai and a city right next to a big hub like Noida? I mean, they just feel different, don't they? Well, by the end of this, you're going to know the exact terms that experts use to spell out that difference. Okay, so where do we even begin? Well, the first and honestly the most intuitive way to understand a city is just by looking at its scale. It really is all about the basics. How big is it? How many people live there? And what's its relationship to all the other urban areas around it? The most basic building block here is the metropolis. This is your big, major city, the cultural and economic heavyweight of its region. It's the main hub for everything: jobs, entertainment, transport. Think of a place like New York or Mumbai. They're basically the suns that all the smaller towns and cities orbit around. But here's a question. What happens when these huge metropolitan areas just keep growing and growing until they start to kind of bleed into one another? Creating this massive interconnected chain of cities? Is there even a word for that? Oh, absolutely. And the word is megalopolis. It's the perfect term for a massive urban corridor, like that famous stretch in the U.S. that goes all the way from Boston down to Washington, D.C. It's a completely different scale of city living. And these terms didn't just appear out of nowhere. The word megalopolis was actually coined by the geographer Jean Gottman. He needed a way to talk about this brand new phenomenon of urban superregions. Pretty cool, huh? Now, this is where it gets really interesting, because there's a subtle but super important difference here. A megalopolis is a chain of big cities that are still separate, but they're all linked up economically. A conurbation, on the other hand, a term from Patrick Geddes, is when different towns physically merge and become one single continuous urban sprawl. Okay, ready for the next one? Sticking with this idea of scale and influence, what do you think a primate city is? The name itself kind of gives you a clue that it's all about dominance. So a primate city, a concept from geographer Mark Jefferson, is basically the undisputed champion of its country. It's way, way larger than any other city, and it usually concentrates almost all of the nation's economic, political, and cultural power in one single spot. This can make it a really powerful national symbol, like Paris is for France or Bangkok for Thailand. All right, let's switch gears to our second lens. We've talked about scale, but what about a city's purpose or its mission? See, today, a lot of cities aren't just growing randomly. They're actively trying to evolve to solve some of our planet's biggest challenges, like climate change and inefficiency. This table lays it out perfectly. It's like a problem and solution guide. If your city's big problem is endless sprawl, the proposed solution is the compact city model. If it's just really inefficient, you start looking towards becoming a smart city. And to tackle waste and pollution, the ultimate goal is to become a sustainable city. And here's what that actually looks like on the ground. A compact city is all about high-density living where you can easily walk, bike, or take public transit everywhere. A smart city is wired up with sensors and data to manage everything from traffic jams to energy use in real time. And a sustainable city, well, it's aiming for things like carbon neutrality, running on renewables, and using these really clever sponge city techniques to manage rainwater naturally. And finally, our third lens. This one zooms way out from what a city is doing inside its borders to what its function is on the outside. What's its role, not just in its own region, but on the entire world stage? How does it plug into the global network of money and culture? This brings us to a huge idea in urban studies. Who do you think we have to thank for popularizing the concept of the global city? This idea that a few key cities basically act as the command and control centers for the whole world's economy. The answer is the sociologist Saskia Sassen. She's the one who really defined global cities as these primary nodes in the global economic network. We're talking about places like London, Tokyo, and New York, where the massive financial and corporate decisions that affect the entire planet are being made every single day. And a city's role isn't set in stone. It changes over time, usually reflecting how its economy has evolved. A perfect example is the post-industrial city. This is a place that used to be all about manufacturing, making stuff, but has now shifted to an economy driven by information, services, and tech. Okay, so we've gone from the global, now let's zoom all the way down to the hyperlocal. In India, for example, there's a really specific classification called a census town. And for a place to get this label, it has to meet 3 very strict rules: a minimum population, a certain density, and a really important economic shift. And that economic shift all comes down to this one number, 75%. This is the magic number. To be a census town, at least 3/4 of its male working population has to be in jobs outside of farming. That right there is the official government marker that an area has tipped over from being rural to being urban. And this brings us right back around to where we started, to our original question about a city like Noida. The precise term for it is a satellite town. See, it's located near a major metropolis, Delhi in this case, but it's designed to be self-sufficient with its own economy and its own government. It kind of orbits the big city, but it isn't swallowed up by it. So let's pull all these different threads together, shall we? We've just unlocked a really powerful 3-part framework you can use to understand pretty much any city around you. So just to recap, we've learned to see cities through 3 different lenses. We can look at their scale, using words like metropolis or megalopolis. We can understand their mission, whether they're trying to be more compact, smart, or sustainable. And we can define their role, from a local satellite town all the way up to a powerhouse global city. So the next time you look at a skyline or you're just walking down a busy street, you now have the vocabulary to decode what you're actually seeing. So my question to you is this: using these new lenses, what kind of city are you in right now?